So excited for this, guys. Today we have a special guest joining us, Robert Sikes, aka Keto Savage, the CEO and founder of Keto Savage, a health and fitness company, and CEO and founder of Keto Break, a ketogenic meal replacement bar. He also wrote a book titled Ketogenic Bodybuilding. Robert Sikes, welcome back to the Ketones and Coffee podcast, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to be here chatting with you. It's an honor yet again.
Awesome, man. So I had you first back here, April 2022, episode 72, actually. Fast
Yes.
forward to today, 2 years after, episode 172. If you can believe it. How have you been, man?
It's been a crazy few years, man, as we can all attest. I mean, 2020 it was
Yeah.
wild. It's 2022, 2024. It's crazy. It's now 2024. But yeah, this past year's been a doozy for me with all the competitions and the having a kiddo and then all the business
Yeah.
endeavors. So we've been going a million miles an hour, but we're just happy to keep trucking, man. We got a lot going on right now, but it's all exciting stuff.
A million miles an hour is right, man. I followed your socials, man, and COVID didn't really slow you down, brother. So I was following you on socials, man. You first talk at KetoCon when I first had you on, and
Mhm.
since then you've been a monster on stage, brother. You've grown your business, like you talk about. In October, you won WNBF Natural Pro Bodybuilder. Congratulations! And you talked about complete absence of carbohydrates, bro. How does that feel, man?
It's good, man. I mean, I've been doing keto now for 8 or 9 years, and I competed in 2017 with the ketogenic approach. I got my pro card in a different federation then, and then I
Mhm.
dieted down in 2020 to compete, but then COVID canceled that like a week before the show. So
Yeah,
2023 was time to just get to work and put what I had
yeah.
learned to the table from a ketogenic standpoint, and did 5 competitions over the course of a few months. I think my first one was end of September. The last one was mid-November. So very busy competition season last year. And we were traveling nonstop, driving to most of these shows from one end of the coast to the next, with a 1.5-year-old driving with us. So it was total chaos,
Yeah.
but a great experience for sure. And it was awesome to do it all with the ketogenic approach.
Yeah, man. And also love when you said that, and I quote, I truly hope that this win illustrates what it is possible with a well formulated ketogenic diet in the world of human performance. And that is the mic drop right there, man. How in the world are you able to do all this, man? You talked about having your businesses, being a father, man, also coaching clients on the side while doing competitions, man. Like how do you put it in all how do you fit it in your schedule now being here, talking about it, you have your own podcast, like how are you able to fit all of that in your schedule, man?
Man, sometimes I don't know. I feel like I'm spread pretty thin right now, to be honest. Like I'm trying to prioritize things, and I don't
Yeah.
sleep very much. I can certainly say that I sacrifice sleep, which is not ideal by any
Mm.
means, but that's just kind of what tends to get pushed on the back burner is sleep. But yeah, man, I feel like we all have the same amount of time in a day. You got to prioritize the things
Mhm.
that you want to focus on. I don't do many things that waste time. I don't spend hours scrolling on Instagram. I
Right.
don't watch Netflix. I don't have a TV, so I don't do any time wasting things by any
Yeah.
means.
Maybe I should have that tutorial from you for not going on social media too much and scrolling, right? you I'm very grateful for what you're doing, man. You're putting everybody on notice. Like I subscribed on your emails, and if I were you, I would too. No junk is promised, right?
Appreciate
Ketobodybuilding.com. And there was a quote there, man, that resonated with me, that reads, and I won't read the whole quote. It says, it goes, regret is far worse feeling than a temporary low. Like a regret is far worse than feeling temporary low. I like that, man, and that might be the quote for me. I just want to pick your brain today on what that means to you, man. Like, what does that really mean to you? Like going back to from where you started, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, regret, like I used to be filled with regret. I mean, there was times where I was
Mm-hmm.
working a job I didn't like. I knew I was doing things that I wasn't passionate about, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I was living to my full potential. And now there's a lot of things that I have left to do. I don't feel like my life is done by any means,
Yeah.
but I feel very confident that I'm spending my time doing the things that I am meant to be doing. I feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
making a positive impact in this world. And for that reason, if
You
I
are,
literally
man.
was not able to wake up tomorrow, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, I can confidently say that I was able to live and die
Mm,
without regret and things left undone. Yes, there's things I still want to do, but I'm doing everything in my power to do those things. I'm not
mm,
leaving anything in the tank, so to speak. And I think with that comes periods of time where you're just like drained and depleted and exhausted and fatigued,
yeah.
but I'm not feeling regret, so there's definitely low
Mm,
moments, but I'd rather have those low moments than a sense of regret or feeling of inadequacy. So that's what it means for me.
mm. Yeah, man, that's strong when you're like you're having that bad day. That's strong. That quote, I'll keep that in mind, right somewhere. It's just very powerful when you think about it. Down the line when it's all said and done, man, you don't want to have it full of regrets. Awesome, man. When I first had you on the show, you talked about your story and how you broke free from disordered eating, you developed from bodybuilding, and how the ketogenic diet not only improved your relationship with food, but also allowed you to surpass even your current level of health and success. I know we talked about how athletes in the bodybuilding community may struggle with disordered eating, and I want to understand that. Like, can you take us through what goes into a maybe a routine of a bodybuilder at the start of the prep, and then the weeks after the competition is done? What goes into that we don't understand as regular people, that doesn't understand that world?
Yeah, I mean, well, traditionally, bodybuilders, regardless of the diet you're following, you're typically tracking everything with a high degree of accuracy. You're weighing out your food, you're measuring your macros, your fats, proteins, carbohydrates consumed, your calories consumed, and you're adjusting your calorie and your training appropriately. So it's just a very measured, regimented approach,
Mm,
and you do that for many many weeks, many many months. Like my last prep was 33 weeks, as an example, and you get really lean, you get really depleted, really dialed in. Your hormones are in a state of flux. Your metabolism is down regulated. Your leptin
mhm,
and ghrelin hormones that regulate hunger and satiety are totally out of whack. And then when that show is over and there's nothing left on the calendar to work towards, it's very easy for many people to just throw all caution to the wind and eat everything in sight because they've felt depleted and restricted for so long. And with that, there's just a very negative downward spiral that oftentimes comes as that being the
mhm.
catalyst. And I mean, for me, my first show, I gained, 20 pounds literally in 24 hours. And I just felt very
Mm,
frustrated with myself. I felt like I didn't have any self discipline. I felt like I just thrown away all the hard work that I'd worked, so hard for to get to
mm,
that level of conditioning and just thrown it away in an instant. And a lot of people that are following more of a traditional diet, they'll eat really clean, like a chicken, broccoli, rice kind of approach. And then when that show
yeah,
is over, they just eat a whole bunch of junk food, lots of, cakes,
yeah.
pizzas, and pies and things of that nature, cookies. And, that's just kind of leaning into that disordered eating tendency. For me, with this last prep, especially, I never changed the style of foods I was eating. It was all the same types of foods, all the good quality foods. I never sacrificed a type of food that I enjoyed eating. I just simply changed the amount that I was eating. And when you're following a well-formulated ketogenic diet, you're not eating really any processed junk food anyways. So after the show
Mm,
was over, I just simply scaled that intake back up slowly. But again, all coming
mm,
from the same foods that I enjoy eating anyway. So it was much easier to bridge that gap and not kind of go into a tailspin after the show was over.
yeah, you can imagine, like, if you go after a show, after a competition, it would go, you know, eat whatever you wanted just because you've been preparing for this for 33 weeks, and you talked about being depleted, and packing a lot of weight, weeks after competition. And there's a lot of, struggle that happens internally when you talked about you worked hard, work your ass off just to get into a level of physique, and then you let yourself go, just because the competition is over, right? Do you think
Yeah.
the ketogenic diet allows you to be more, I wouldn't say disciplined, but more dialed in with lifestyle, you think?
Yeah, well, the ketogenic diet, if implemented properly, puts a pretty high emphasis of importance on, sourcing your food from quality ingredients, from quality animal sources, knowing your local farmer and rancher ideally. Like a
Mhm.
lot of that is placed in high regard on a well-formulated ketogenic diet. And if you're following that kind of as the baseline, then it's harder to deviate from that willingly because you understand and appreciate how quality food matters. So if you don't really deviate that from that much on the norm, then after the show is
Right.
over, then you don't really have that broadest spectrum to try and stray away
Right.
from. So it's kind of healthy and helpful in that regard. Now you will gain some body fat for sure. Like right now, I'm several pounds up from what I was at the leanest stage weight, and that's okay. Like that's what you want. Like you can't maintain that show day level of conditioning indefinitely, and you've got to embrace that body fat that comes at a healthy rate, and be okay with that too. And that's not easy either. I mean, it's hard to see yourself super dialed in and conditioned, and then like embrace body fat gain and not
Mhm.
having that level of definition. But you have to have that yin to the yang, so to speak.
So would you say that on the ketogenic diet, when you're doing prep for a competition, you weren't necessarily dieting? You're not changing your diet drastically from like eating a high carb meal to a chicken breast and broccoli type of meal just to be ready for a competition. But on a ketogenic diet, you're basically just you know adjusting your fat intake and your protein intake, but you're essentially just eating the same meals. Does that
Yeah, I
make
mean,
sense?
I'm pretty much
Yeah.
eating the exact same thing, whether I'm in a prep or not. It's just the amounts that I'm eating that changes and the
Yeah.
level of accuracy and tracking. Yeah, because when I'm in a prep, I'm tracking everything. I'm weighing everything to the
Mhm.
gram. Everything is very
Yeah.
dialed in, but it's all the same foods that I eat now in the building phase.
How important is it, do you think, that being dialed in and tracking everything? You even track hormone production, right? I believe.
I track it. I mean, I
Y-
get my blood work done, so I kind of see where my hormones are at. But I
Yeah.
track, electrolyte consumption, so how
Mhm.
much salt I'm
Yeah.
adding to my foods. Like I track everything.
Is that something that regular bodybuilders, I mean, non keto bodybuilders, is that something that they track normally or not?
They'll normally always, weigh their foods and get that, macros
Mhm.
tracked. Not everybody weighs
Yeah.
their salt and electrolytes. Not
Mm.
everybody gets blood work drawn. But for me, the more data you have, the better, you can structure the
Mm.
plan and just make sure things are dialed in. I mean, what can be measured can be managed. So for me, I like having all the data that I possibly can.
What do you think is the most important data that you've added since keto that helped you, uh, stay consistent or uh, maintain the level of physique that you have, plus, feeling good at the same time? Because I, I'm not a bodybuilder by any means, right? But I do know when you do lower your calorie intake that it can get depleted. You can get depleted. Is there a data that you've started tracking that helped your journey? If you would rank it number one in your list, what would that be?
That's a good question. I don't think there's like a objective data point that
Mm,
I think is has made a profound difference for me. So it's more so just the perspective overall. Like I've done
mhm,
so many competition preps now that I know what to expect and how my body's going to respond at a given caloric intake, at a different macronutrient distribution and
mhm,
ratio, with a certain amount of cardio, with a certain amount of resistance training and intensity. So like honestly, just the more shows I do, the more perspective I gain. And I've got this innate sense of how my body is feeling and performing at a given
mm,
set of variables, and that is super helpful because then I'm kind of leaning into
yeah,
that intuition that has come from just years of doing this. As far as like just hard data points, like I track, body composition, body fat. I track my strength and lifting metrics, so I can ensure that I'm not losing lean tissue or skeletal muscle
mhm,
tissue. I track, body composition via DEXA, calipers, in body test. Obviously, I track my weight and my
mm,
macronutrients and total calories. So those are all good numbers and variables to track. But honestly, just the perspective gained over years of doing it is probably the most valuable
yeah.
asset for sure.
I don't want to pin keto bodybuilders against regular bodybuilders. I don't know if I could call them regular bodybuilders, but do you think that the ketogenic diet is I want to say superior option for bodybuilders especially? And if you do, why do you think that will be?
Well, I've done them both. Like I've done, the ketogenic approach, and then prior to
Yeah.
going keto, I did it, traditionally with a high carb, high protein, low fat approach. And
Mm,
for me, I've definitely gotten leaner with a ketogenic approach. I've felt better. My hormones have been more stable. My relationship with food has improved.
Mhm.
My performance and ability to have energy and honestly just mental cognition and zeal for life has all improved in the
Yeah.
depths of a prep following a ketogenic approach versus a traditional diet. So, yeah, I may be a little bit biased, but I would definitely stack the ketogenic
Yeah.
bodybuilding approach over the others for sure.
How is the ketogenic diet stacking against other type of diets when in terms of just going into a prep and then going to bodybuilding? Like how does it stack against other types of diets? What are the other diets out there, by the way? Is it just the bro diet or is just
Yeah, there's, I
is
mean,
the
several different
macros diet?
variations.
Yeah.
Bro diet, eating 6 or 7 meals a day. Flexible dieting, if it fits your macros, is really popular. So basically, just this massive emphasis towards calories and tracking that, but it coming from a variety of sources. Not
Yep.
really as much attention towards quality of the ingredients. So lots of different approaches there. As far as main differences, especially with my protocol with the ketogenic approach, like my dietary fat stays relatively high throughout the entirety of my prep, even when I'm at that low calorie intake. My calories are
Mm,
lower, I'm still hungry, but since I am fat adapted and all my energy is coming from fat, both stored and dietary, by my dietary fat staying relatively high as a percentage of total calories, I've got a pretty good degree of energy coming in at all times.
mhm.
I'm able to
Yeah.
function at a higher rate. Whereas if you're doing traditional diets, there's times where your carbs are very low. There's times where your fat is pretty much always low, and then there's times where your protein typically stays high, but protein is not a great substrate for energy. So in
Yeah.
traditional preps, when you're taking in 300 grams of protein, but you're low carb and low fat, like you're not really feeling optimal. And I don't have to really deal with that
Mm.
with a ketogenic approach.
I imagine how a lot goes into a competition. Obviously, you want to be maintaining muscle, like you said, while you lose fat at the same time. What for you? What is the most important aspect of bodybuilding that going keto just makes things a lot easier? You talked about just having that feeling good. Is and having that energy, right? What is it about the ketogenic diet that makes not easy but easier? You could say mentally or
Uh,
physically. Yeah.
yeah, well, I think from a physical standpoint, like ketones are anti-inflammatory. Having
Mm,
a higher fat diet, ketogenic approach typically leads to less inflammation. So I'm able to train more frequently. And as a natural bodybuilder,
mm,
being able to train more frequently and recover
yeah,
more efficiently is huge. So the
yeah,
recovery benefits are hard to go unnoticed. And then honestly, just from a mental cognition standpoint, like because ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier, and as ketones
mm,
get higher when you're deeper into a cut, like you're not having this massive downtrend in cognitive function. I'm able to, maintain mental acuity and clarity at a high level throughout my entire prep. Whereas in
yeah,
the past, I would just be feeling like a zombie, like not able to carry on a
yeah,
conversation. And that's not really the case at all when you take a ketogenic
yeah.
approach.
You talked about training more. How much more are we talking about? Comparing to when you were not on the ketogenic diet and when you did the ketogenic diet. How much
Yeah.
more
So
training are we talking about?
my training has honestly been the same, but I recover better from my training now, and I'm typically
Mm,
doing like a full body routine currently. So I'm training the same muscle group every single day I train, which is 5-6 days a week. So much more
right.
training frequency for a given body part, and I just have much shorter time to recovery. So that's been super beneficial. I could train with more frequency and with more intensity when I do train. So that's boded well for me and just adding more tissue over the years.
And I've seen you train bodybuilding athletes and normal people. I seen you train normal people in general, looking their best shapes of their lives at any age. We talked about 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, and you had our good friend Coach Bronson. I think you coached
Mhm.
him for the 7-month cut as an example. So I want to ask you about his your approach to his cut. You
Yeah.
had him at you posted this on Instagram and you had him to start at 2500 calories, initially doing a high fat diet at 80%. And then over the 7-month period, you gradually reduce his intake to 1700 and increasing protein to 190 grams at his height, like, and 60% fat. And then he got shredded and the best he ever felt. But obviously, so you had a baseline, I believe you call it caloric maintenance.
Mhm.
at 2,500 and gradually over the period of time tapering his calories down. What's the reason behind reducing caloric intake slowly? Why shouldn't people, just drop their calories down to 1,700 as an example?
Yeah, because if you start, with an automatic drop of 500, 1,000 calories,
Mm,
you will definitely lose some weight, but then you're
yeah.
going to plateau because your body's just going to reset at that lower metabolic set point. And then when you keep doing that, there's
Mm,
not really any, like you're going to run out of caloric runway. There's not really room to taper it further if you're having these massive, aggressive calorie drops. Whereas if you drop them very slowly, and then you can kind of try and stay ahead of your metabolic adaptations, then you're going to be able to build up momentum and keep seeing progress as opposed to hitting those plateaus. Plus, you don't want to leave any caloric runway on the table, so to speak. So, like if you're able to see a response by dropping 50 calories, then that's much safer than trying to
mm,
drop by 500 calories. Like you don't want to take any
right,
more than you need to. Try and treat it like a minimum viable
right.
dose is key. And if you're making these very small incremental adjustments week after week after week, you can make it more sustainable, which is obviously beneficial from a psychological standpoint. But
Yeah.
then you're also able to build up the momentum and feel confident you're not leaving any calories on the table because you are able to implement this minimum of effective dose.
Yeah. And is it because we are all different? We respond to food differently. Now, I imagine like somebody who is obese, let's say eating 3,000, 4,000, even 5,000 calories, they probably have fast metabolism because they have to metabolize that amount, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
metabolism's incredibly adaptable. I mean, like if you
yeah.
start eating more food, like your metabolism upregulates. If you start eating less food, your metabolism downregulates. People that are incredibly obese, they're often able to, maintain a higher caloric threshold than people that are chronically under eating for sure. Because like their body's trying to, maintain that higher degree of body fat that it's carrying around at all times. But I would still take a pretty gradual approach, even to someone that is consuming a massive surplus like that, just simply
Yeah.
because we don't know where their personal metabolic tipping point is, and
Yeah.
you can't really figure that out with any degree of accuracy until you start chipping away
Mhm.
gradually.
And I think is the problem with most, the in and out, the eat less and exercise more. When we're talking about people who are incredibly obese, right? When you talk about people who, you know, go to their doctor and their doctor says, "Hey, you got to eat less, exercise more," and they figure out like from 5,000 they have to cut their calories to 2,000,
Mhm.
right? And obviously, if you cut your calories down to half, right, you're gonna be, so depleted, right? How do you determine the optimal balance between that? So is that part of why we have to do it gradually?
Yeah, because when you're doing it
Yeah.
gradually, like, you're able to really fine-tune various different tipping points in your body. Like, you're able to figure out what your unique protein threshold is. You can figure out what macronutrient distribution your body responds best to.
Yeah.
You can measure your ketones and glucose throughout to see where the trends are there. You can kind of
Yeah.
be conscious of your sleep and how that is being affected as things change. But if you drastically cut your calories by 1,000, there's a
Mhm.
massive window there, and you have no idea at what point things would have started potentially changing because you just hacked away 1,000 calories haphazardly. So I'm typically adjusting things in 25, 50, 70 calorie increments over the course of a week. And I'm
Mhm.
very, very gradual with it. I'm adjusting things by 5 gram increments, 5 grams protein, 5 grams fat. Uh, Very, very gradual, which makes it very
Yeah.
sustainable. Like if you're, chipping away that few of calories, I mean, you may be just simply changing your diet by reducing your intake by one whole egg a week. Whereas,
Mm.
like if you go the 1,000 calorie route, you're removing one or two meals a week, which is
Yeah.
just much harder to wrap your head around.
Yeah, and you said that you don't wanna be cutting a lot of calories and you get the same result, right?
Mhm.
And reaching that plateau, because by then you'll have to cut more calories. Um,
Yeah,
and
I
the
mean,
and
people do that, like, you're gonna run
Mhm.
out of calories eventually. Like, if you start
Yeah.
drastically
Yeah.
cutting, like, you can only cut so far before you've gotta reverse that
Yeah.
back up.
Yeah. And that's probably why, mm, you know, the calories in and out model is getting a little crap because of that, and that's something that I've never, I haven't seen a lot of people talk about gradually tapering down their calories when in terms of just losing weight. And I want to go back to people who are training for a bodybuilding comp. How do you ensure that clients are able to maintain strength though, when I know we talk about prioritizing dietary fat during a cut. You had Brunson as an example, do the same type of exercises without lowering the load. Like
Hmm.
how do you make sure that their muscle mass or they maintain strength in the process?
Well, when you're in a cut, the main goal is not to build more muscle, it's just to maintain what you've got.
Mm,
So,
right.
continuing to lift hard and heavy when you are dropping your calories is the best way that you can preserve lean tissue. It's going to be harder to lift hard
Mhm,
as the calories are decreasing because your energy is, decreasing. But
mhm,
if you're able to maintain that degree of intensity, then you're going to be able to preserve that lean tissue much better
mhm,
because if you start dropping into a deficit and you start reducing your training load, your body is going to become more susceptible to tapping into that stored lean tissue as a way to
yeah.
make up that caloric void. But if you continue to demand that tissue be used, then it's going to be, it's going to fight to preserve that. So really trying to maintain training load and intensity and volume is key as calories drop. That's like the single best thing you can do to preserve muscle mass in the context of a caloric deficit. So it does get harder to do so, but it really just knowing what your proxies of your lifting metrics are, tracking that at least on your primary compound movement, so you kind of have a baseline there, and then trying to maintain that throughout the caloric deficit is key.
Mm. And you've always talked about protein,
Mhm.
and you've always talked about how, overdoing protein isn't really the way to go, right? How do you figure out what's the threshold for each individual's protein intake?
Yeah, I mean, protein's super important. Like you got to have ample protein, but the notion that it's you can consume it in excess is not really accurate
Yeah.
because like there's a threshold to everything. So especially if you're trying to optimize from a fat metabolism standpoint, like if you're consuming excessive protein relative to dietary fat, then it's going to be more prone to, you know, go through the gluconeogenic pathways and you're going to be using that
Mhm.
glucose inefficiently as a source of energy from the protein that it's derived from, which is again is
Mhm.
not efficient process for energy. So if you've got ample protein, ample amino acids to preserve tissue, to build tissue if you're in a building phase, then any excess, calories would be better off partitioned towards dietary fat rather than additional protein.
Mhm.
So knowing where that threshold is for each individual and getting that dialed in is key. I mean, you can
Yeah.
tolerate if you've got more muscle, you can tolerate more protein as well. I mean, like I
Yeah.
consume quite a bit of protein. Like I'm taking in
Yeah.
250 grams of protein a day right now, which is a lot, but I'm still able to
250.
produce
Yeah.
ketones and still totally fat adapted and optimizing fat
Yeah.
metabolism. But just figuring out where that unique threshold is key.
And because you can't increase protein intake without sacrificing some fat, right?
Yeah, I mean, like there is a higher thermic effect of food with protein, but I wouldn't really ever
Right.
suggest people try and use that as the main lever to manipulate when trying to diet down. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, if you've only got so many calories to work with, then it's either going to be partitioned towards fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So ideally, the carbohydrate is not making up a majority of that intake, and then from there, it's pretty much just figuring out what the ratio and distribution needs to be between the fats and the proteins.
For somebody who wants to start, maybe not go into bodybuilding, but be in the best shape of their life, like let's say somebody like me who wants to take it from here to the next level, maybe somebody who has 20% body fat into 15% body fat. I know we talked about, hey, you gotta sculpt in the gym, you gotta be in the gym, maybe 5 to 6 times a week. But what does that really mean mentally? Like, how do you dial in? Uh, you know, maybe think about some of your clients. What do they need to do to finally, hey, I'm gonna dial into my fat and protein intake? How do I buy in? And what are sort of the things that you talk to your clients about that they have to really prioritize in terms of just going into a cut, especially now where we're going into the spring, into the summer. Like a lot of people are exercising, wanting to lose weight. what's something that you can prioritize in terms of just losing fat?
Commit to the process and
Mm,
do not deviate. I've
mm,
worked with like 600 plus clients at this point, and the ones that commit to the process fully and completely, they weigh out their
mm,
food, they prep their meals, they don't miss their training sessions, they don't deviate, they see amazing results. The ones
mm,
that are always fudging the numbers, having the cheap meals, skipping the
mm,
training sessions, they're always
mm,
going to be stuck in purgatory because they're never going to
mm,
see the results they want. They're always kind of like going back and forth with things. It takes time to truly change your composition and to get really and truly dialed in and leaned out to that degree.
mm,
And anybody can do it, but you have to 100% commit to the process. You can't, half-ass it and expect amazing results. So like when I'm in a prep, I flip that switch and I'm all business. I've got all my food prepped and ready to go. I've got everything weighed out. I've got my
mm,
structure set up, my schedule set up, everything's dialed in and optimized, everything is in place, and I do not deviate from it at all. And that is how you see the results.
mm.
Super simple. Not
Yeah,
easy,
yeah,
super simple.
yeah. How do you retract those demons though?
I just,
Demons talking about just deviations.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, perspective is a lot of it. Like, the more you do it,
Yeah,
the easier it gets because you have that
yeah,
perspective. But honestly, just like, how bad do you want it? Like, everybody's got,
yeah.
conflictions in life. Everybody's got distractions. Everybody's got
Mm,
things that are pulling at them. But if you truly want it and you want to take it to the next level, then anything that does not contribute to you getting to the next level is noise in your life and should be removed from the equation entirely.
mm, mm. How do you like? Obviously, a client may come to you, and I love what you're saying. Your a client comes to you and he believes that he wants to shred. He wants to be shredded. He wants to have six pack abs by the end of this, maybe 7 month journey. How do you know that they're actually committed to the process, or how do you get them to commit? Or is that part of the, or do they have to come to you committed already?
I mean, I can usually tell, like, when I'm working with somebody, I can usually tell after
Yeah.
the first few weeks if they've bought in or not. Like, you know, if they're active on my communication with them, if they're, sending me updates proactively, then I know that they want
Yeah.
it. Like, I've got some clients that I'm always having to reach out to them, like, "Hey, what's your weigh-in? Hey, did you work out this week? Hey, did you hit your
Yeah.
macros?" They're just, like, not responsive. Like, if that's the case, then
Mm,
I already know everything I need to know. Like, they're not
right.
gonna be putting in the work.
Right. Right, right. I imagine that. I imagine that. Somebody not being responsive. That means that says a lot, actually, without saying
Yeah.
anything. Hey, man, this new thing you got going on, man. You got this contest prep course. We
Yeah.
talked about this contest prep course, and I heard it's the most comprehensive course on the internet right now. Talk about it, man.
Yeah, so it hadn't officially launched. I don't know when this podcast is going to go live. The course will probably officially launch mid-May is the goal. But yeah, it is
Okay.
basically hands down the most comprehensive course on natural bodybuilding from a ketogenic standpoint that you will find online. Period.
Hmm.
Full stop. No questions asked. I mean, it's basically everything that you need to know about dialing things in from a natural bodybuilding standpoint with a ketogenic diet. Like, it goes into
Hmm.
the training, the nutrition, the macros, the calculations, the meal prep, the posing, the everything. Like, if you wanted to dial things in and not have to have a coach, then you could just simply get
Hmm.
this course of everything at your fingertips to bring the best package and conditioning you could to the stage, without question.
I love it, man. Because but this way, you get to help a lot more people, right? Obviously, you're just one
Yeah,
person.
that's the
You can't
goal.
help everybody. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
and
goal.
I'm
I can
excited
scale
for
it
it,
up.
man.
I am too.
It's like you're talking to me. It's like you're talking to me here. This I get selfish now. This interview is for me.
Hey, well, I'm super excited about it, man. There's gonna be a community feature there so everybody can
Yeah,
kind of, like, collaborate with one another,
nice.
and have that accountability kinda baked into it. It's got, like, its own specialty AI software that is all built around, my protocol and the ketogenic diet and everything, so it's very comprehensive, and I think it's just gonna be an amazing resource for everybody that wants to take things to the next level.
Nice, man. Appreciate that. Appreciate what you're doing, man. Appreciate you coming on here and just dropping some nuggets of information, man. When it comes to keto bodybuilding, there's no other person out there who talks the talk and walks the walk at the same time, man. And nothing better than to have Robert Sikes here on our podcast. So thank you, Robert, for coming on, man, and sharing your story, man. You're
Hey,
amazing. Keep doing what
my
you're doing.
pleasure. My pleasure, man. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm super passionate about this lifestyle, so I appreciate you letting me just get the word out. So, yeah, man, thank you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you, man. All right. Bye bye.
Take care.